Hi, folks. This presentation is going to be nuts and bolts, important things to consider and put into play when you're doing a window light portrait. So this is like doing a studio portrait, but without expensive tools. And you've already taken a look at how to build a window light studio. So we have a few other things on our list here that we have to put into operation when we do our portrait shoot. Posing. Um, the mug shot is neither it's front and side, and we don't want either one of those. That's not a portrait. That's an identification picture. So what we call a three-quarter pose has been around the art world for an awful long time. Uh, you'll notice that the Mona Lisa has her chin pointed to one side, but she didn't have her head twisted so far that the tip of her nose jutted out beyond the cheek. And we have a nice triangle of light right over here, and this side that's facing, well, it wasn't the camera, it was the artist, is in the shade. So we're sneaking up on some of the characteristics of three-quarter pose. This is a very standard type of traditional portrait, and we will be asking you to do some creative portraits too. But learn this way of doing things. Now notice here that wardrobe selection, we have a darker color than the skin. The background is darker. We want the face to be the lightest thing in the picture. Also notice that the hands are included and there's a prop being used here, a little pen. So this sample over here is not too bad. So we talked about the tip of the nose, and we don't want that to stick out beyond this over here. This is called the line of the cheek. So you want to make sure that you have a little bit of space in between those two. Only one ear is visible to the camera. Now we have to use our imagination here because her hair is covering, but we know that there is an ear under there. And the other ear is turned to the side and it's not visible. So when you're doing this kind of portrait, if you're seeing two ears, you don't have the three-quarter pose right. And then we have light falling on the important parts of the face. We will get to that. So we want to have light in both eyes. This one's a little bit dark over here. So this is close to being a really good picture, but not quite. We like to have the head tilted slightly. It's not straight up and down, and that's a good thing to do. Ladies, you can tilt your head quite a bit. Gentlemen, you can tilt your head a little. The shoulders are at an angle to the camera, not facing the camera squarely. One shoulder is closer than the other. So when I talked about checking in your viewfinder, if you see two ears, you don't have a three-quarter pose. If you see one ear and the other one is hiding over here. This is the 3/4 pose. Even PetSmart photographers, uh, they use a 3/4 pose sometimes with their animals. So I mentioned earlier that you don't want to make life harder for yourself. You're trying to deliver a picture that's going to make people happy. And if they show up in the wrong outfit, you're going to be in a nightmare situation. So it's entirely apropos for you to counsel with your sitter ahead of time and ask them to follow along these guidelines here. Now, I can say Google any portrait photography studio and they will have a list of do's and don'ts as far as wardrobe is concerned. I've just written down a few of them here. On the right column, uh, many people feel uncomfortable with their hands and they don't know what to do. This is an opportunity for you to give a hint to the viewer who doesn't know the sitter something about their personality. So for a kid, it might be a favorite toy, but don't let it dominate the picture. And for an adult, it might be a hobby tool or something that they use in their everyday life. Now, with window light, you're not going to have as much light as outside. So I'm going to ask you to try ISO 800. And if that's not fast enough and you still get blurry pictures, try ISO 1600. I'd like you to shoot an aperture priority, and you can start with autofocus, but you may have to shift to manual. We'll talk about each one of these as we go along. So whatever camera you have, this one is set for an ISO that's auto, and don't do that, okay? So maybe if you have a big window, maybe you might be able to get along with a 200 or a 400. But I'm guessing that many of you will have to be shooting at 800 or 1600. If you get too much above that, you're going to have a lot of noise, which won't be very pleasant with the portrait. So if you have a Nikon, you're going to see this A symbol here. If you have a Canon, you're going to see this AV, aperture value symbol. So I'd like you to work with that. And here's a camera that's set up. It's got the AV. And I'm going to suggest that you try and do shallow depth of field and blur out whatever background you have behind your person. So on a zoom lens, a lot of times that's f5.6. If you can get it to go up to 3.5, that's even better. Now, a little bit about autofocus. It likes to grab a hold of features on the face, and sometimes it misses the most important feature on the face. That being the eye that is closest to the camera. That needs to be tack sharp. That needs to be every eyelash clearly visible, and you need to be able to see very clearly the eye color and everything about it. So if your camera is failing to do that, it's focusing on the ear, or it's focusing on the hair, or it's focusing on something else, then you have to grab this switch over here on the camera barrel, and you all have your own camera manuals. So you're going to be looking for that switch. And when you put it on manual, then you're going to be using the focus ring. And on most cameras, that will be the ring that's furthest away from the camera body. This ring here is to control the zoom, control how many millimeters you're doing. So don't twist that in and out. The focusing ring is up front, very close to the end of the lens. Focus on the eyelashes of the eye closest to the camera. Some people talk about a portrait lens, and one of the characteristics of a portrait lens is that it is a mild telephoto. So I'm looking on this lens barrel and I'm seeing the number 55. What I need to do is line that up with this index mark right here. Okay, so many of you have a kit lens, and you'll have this 18 to 55 thereabouts. I want you to make sure that you're setting your zoom at about 55 millimeters. That can blur out the background while keeping the face in sharp focus. So here's a no-no. Don't ever use a wide angle lens like an 18 millimeter up close on somebody's face. I think this is a fisheye lens actually, but you do distort their face. So don't use that for an individual portrait. Now, a steady camera is really important. I just grabbed this photo. We'll talk about it. So when you are setting up your studio and you're getting your sitter in place and you're working on the lighting, hand hold your camera and look through it, but make sure that you twist the camera so the camera is in a landscape position, not in a horizontal position. The shots that I'm going to ask you to take are head and shoulders kinds of pictures that you might see in a yearbook or something like that. Pretty standard. So we call this a vertical camera orientation. Once you find the general area, then you bring in a tripod, and then you put the tripod where you have been hand holding it. If you put the camera on the tripod to start with, you're going to be frustrated. It's really difficult to move a tripod around, raise it and lower it, and all of that sort of stuff. So hand hold it first, find out where the camera needs to be, and then put the tripod underneath it. Now, when I say that I have a teacher or I have a friend that I look up to, did you hear me? I look up to that person. That's a compliment to the person. So when you're shooting your standard portrait, your traditional portrait, you're going to be, here is the eye level here, okay? Just imagine a horizontal line. That is the sitter's eye level. Well, you want to bring your camera down not too far, just a little bit, and you're going to tilt it just a little bit, and you're going to be looking up at the person. If you lower the camera too far, you're going to emphasize the nostrils, and we nickname that Three Little Pigs kind of portrait, and we don't like that. So the camera is just a little lower than the sitter's eye level. So when you get desperate for a shot and somebody is not cooperating with you, instead of saying smile, you start yelling, smile! And of course, you're going to get a fake smile. So I'm just going to say, when you're doing a portrait shoot, you would much, much rather get into a conversation with your subject, and as you are conversing, you're going to be looking for their expression to change. And it will change, okay? Anytime somebody comes up to you and points a camera in your face, you put on your photo face, and we all have them. We think that this is our best look. And the tragedy is most of the time our photo faces are very artificial and they're like a mask. So a good photographer will talk you out of your photo face, and then you'll have a natural expression. Who is guilty of mouth smiles? M-O-U. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's make a correction there. M-O-U-T-H. Politicians and beauty queens, they have to be smiling all of the time, and it looks phony. Here's somebody that's being a clown, satiring. But the kind of smile that you want is called an eye smile. And that comes from within the person. That comes from that person remembering something fun or something good. And we talk about photographers' rapport. You need to become a friend, even though you maybe just met your sitter. You need to disarm them. You need to say, in as many words, you've got nothing to fear from me. I'm here to help you look your best. And then try and get their mind off of it. Sitting there in a studio, talk to them. If you get an eye smile, you will get a natural mouth smile. Babies are just innocent, and whatever their mood, you're going to know it. When I'm out and about taking pictures and I see somebody that I want to take a picture of, the first thing I try and do is get a sense of whether I can strike up a conversation. And it'll just be the usual. Talk about what the weather is, talk about what the neighborhood's like, and be complimentary. And then the more that you have a chance to talk with them, they have a chance to size you up, and they start to feel more comfortable with you. And it might take me 5 minutes or so to talk to a stranger before I say, I'm making a collection of portraits and I'd like to add your picture to it, and I'll send you a copy of it if you'd like to. I'm not going to charge you anything, but I can email you a copy. And I leave it up to them. And I said, is that okay? And if it isn't, don't worry about it. And some will say, sure. that's fine. And they get excited when they see, I'll email them a picture and they'll be excited about it. And other people, I guess they're running from the law or something. And they just don't want to have their picture taken. So we sign off, and it was a good conversation, and I didn't get a picture, but that's okay. I'm not stealing people's pictures. I want them to give me their picture. I don't want to take their picture. So what do you talk about? Food. That's something everybody talks about. Great vacations. Have them relive the vacation. Have them describe the best part of their vacation. What about their friends? Who's cool? Who's funny? Oh yeah, let's hear about the last time that friend uh, did something kind of crazy, and they'll start to think about that, and you've got to be ready, and you've got to click, click, click your camera as they are talking to you. So it's like there's two people in the room, you and the sitter, but there's a third thing, and that's the camera, and that is recording the conversation visually. So just remember, every expression does not have to be the big happy face. It could be a more pensive kind of face.